Minnesota got most of the national attention for the feel-good story that they were, but when it was all said and done, old favorite and old standby in the Western Division emerges. Wisconsin in the Big Ten championship game yet again, headed to Indianapolis to take on Ohio State. Got Tyler Hunt on the line from Bucky's Fifth Quarter there at SB Nation covering Wisconsin athletics. Of course, this is Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Lock it in right here as we get you set for championship weekend. Tyler, how you doing today?
I'm very good. I'm pretty excited to have the Axe, of course, back in its rightful home of Madison, Wisconsin. They put up a picture of the trophy case, and it looks really nice back in where it's supposed to be. And then, of course, with that comes a trip to Indianapolis, and I'll be driving down on Friday afternoon to go to the game. So who knows what it could be with Ohio State. I know it got ugly last time, but we're excited to be back in the Big Ten championship for the 6th time.
Absolutely. So let's, before we focus on Indianapolis, let you bask in the glory of another Western Division championship and winning it against your rival on the final day of the season. Minnesota scores early to go up 7-0, and then Wisconsin really put down their foot on the Gophers and dominated for the most part on both sides of the ball.
Yeah, it was really a good effort on both sides of the football. I think on the offensive side, they really did a good job of, knowing that Jonathan Taylor was going to be something that was keyed on and basically saying, okay, they're going to take away JT. They're going to focus and put 8-9 guys in the box to stop him, but we can still use him as a decoy. And I think they did a really good job of getting the ball to other guys, getting other pieces of the offense involved. Quintez Cephas had a huge game once again, and Jack Cohn was excellent last Saturday. And I know he's gotten a lot of flack from fans across the season, but he's been one of the more efficient and solid quarterbacks that Wisconsin's had in the last 10, 15 years. So say what you want about Jack. He had a good game when it mattered most in a pretty tough environment. And on defense, it was a really great effort. Minnesota had no real run game to use. And then, of course, Chris Orr and Zach Bond and those guys really did a good job of getting pressure and making it really tough on Tanner Morgan. So overall, I think, offense, defense, special teams, it was probably the cleanest game the Badgers have played, and it showed in the scoreboard.
Yeah, Jonathan Taylor certainly has had better games, 18 for 76 yards. But as you mentioned, Minnesota obviously focusing on him, 18 for 76. Most backs would certainly take still a productive day, but that put not necessarily the bulk of the plays on Cohn's shoulders, but in regards to making big plays when you go 15 of 22 for 280 yards. Considering the inclement weather, no interceptions, 2 touchdown passes, a very productive day for him. That has to be a great sign moving forward as he continues his development.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, his efficiency with the football has really been special this season. He's taking care of it. I know there's some costly turnovers. Everyone looks to that Illinois interception, which was costly and, of course, changed the dynamic of the season. But other than that, he's taken pretty good care of the football, and he's made some nice throws. I think last week his deep ball to Quintez Cephas I think it was his best throw of the 2019 season. I mean, it was perfectly thrown, perfectly placed where Cephas could just run underneath it. And it really, I think, gave him some confidence going into a game where he's probably going to have another game like that. If he puts up stats like that, I think Wisconsin can hang with Ohio State. But if you get one-dimensional like they did the first time, it can get ugly like we've already seen in this season.
Eric Burrell with a big game, and Zach Bond, as you mentioned, one of the better defenders in the Big Ten. 2.5 tackles for loss, 2 sacks, 9 tackles. Caesar Williams had a big interception in the game, defended 4 passes. Tremendous defensive effort from a Minnesota team that's really developed on offense, both running and passing, and has been one of the bigger threats in the conference over the last half of the season. So it's onward to Ohio State. People will automatically look at the 38-7 score and Ohio State's success elsewhere in the Big Ten, coming off a 4-score win against Michigan, and kind of dismiss this one. I have yet to look at a betting line on this one, but the obvious question is, how does this one fare differently than the first one? What needs to happen, and why should we be optimistic that it will?
Yeah, I think, Paul Chris talked about it a little bit yesterday in his Monday presser that they have every week. And he thought that his team, since this last game, has gotten a lot better. Obviously, after 2 straight losses, they could have packed it in, 2 games behind Minnesota and just said, you know what, we'll see what happens. But it doesn't look like it's going to be our year. But they didn't. They rallied back, and everybody started to really play well and get some things figured out. But you could argue on the same side of that Ohio State might be a better football team than they were when they beat Wisconsin the first time. So it's going to be a challenge for sure. Obviously, defensively, they have a lot of talent. They're the number one defense in the country, and you're going to have pretty much the same game that you had last week against Minnesota against Ohio State this week, and then probably then some. So it's going to take 4 quarters of really good, clean football, which nobody has done against Ohio State, yet in 2019. But most teams haven't even put up 1 or 2 good quarters against Ohio State, and Wisconsin hung with them at least tough into that third quarter. So that's the only positive you can really take from that first game. But they certainly saw a recipe to make it work. It just kind of got off the rails that first time.
Of course, the first game was in Columbus. Big advantage for the Buckeyes there. Neutral field this time in Indianapolis, a stadium, a field that these are probably the 2 teams in the Big Ten that are most familiar with the stadium there at Indianapolis. Again, as you mentioned, the Badgers going to 6 Big Ten championship games, and this will be, of course, 2 in 3 in 4 years if we go to 2016, and for the Buckeyes, 3 in a row. Despite not having the home field this time around, on the other hand, you would think Ohio State being a little bit more athletic, a faster team, they may like the indoor conditions, of course, in the middle of December in Indianapolis, and that may favor them. On the flip side, I can't back this up, Tyler, but I would expect that if we went through conference championship play, go through the history of the 5 major conferences, I would think that the team that loses the regular season game, when there is one, typically fares better in the rematch. There just seems to be something about, there shouldn't be any more incentive. It's a championship game, but just in regards to having that incentive of, okay, we might be a little bit disrespected. Nobody's giving us a chance. We're going to go out there and fight a little bit harder. Also, the advantage of, if you can call it an advantage of things going wrong in the first game, and therefore having to fix those problems, as opposed to if you won the game, and especially if it was decidedly a big win, as it was, thinking, the coaches have to be thinking, okay, well, it worked the first time. Do we stay with this, or do we try to tweak things? So it just seems to favor. I don't have anything to back this up in terms of metrics, but the losing team in the regular season having a bit of a psychological edge, as long as they didn't get totally beaten down. And I don't think that's a mark of a Wisconsin team. They'll come in, they're focused, they don't get intimidated by anyone, so they'll be on top of their game, and I would expect them to show up and play well.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think back to last night I was watching the Monday Night Football game, and they were talking about Russell Wilson's one season in Madison against Kirk Cousins, because they were battling in that Monday night game. And Michigan State beat them in the regular season, and then Wisconsin came back and got the last laugh in the Big Ten title game. Obviously, I don't like to dig up that Hail Mary by Cousins. That is a dagger in a lot of Wisconsin fans' hearts, but it just shows that, I think your correlation is correct in that, a team like Wisconsin this is their season, and this comes down to, they're not going to the playoff, but maybe you can get to a Rose Bowl if you can, shock the world and take out the number 1 team. So it's been a motivating factor for them all season long. Obviously, since they lost that game, they knew what they'd have to do to get back to this Big Ten title game and get another shot. So it's definitely been in the back of their minds, and I think they're going to come out and put up a fight and see what happens in Indianapolis.
And for Ohio State, of course, they had to get off the mat against Penn State, turn around, go on the road, go to Michigan. You would consider that maybe if it was somewhere else in the season to be a bit of a letdown game. Obviously, it's not going to be a letdown game, Ohio State going up against Michigan. So they get psyched up and ready and prepared and sell themselves out and blow out Michigan. So it wasn't necessarily a difficult game in regards to the scoreboard in the fourth quarter. But obviously, all you had to do was look at Ryan Day's comments on the field after the game, and you see how much Ohio State puts into this game. He got very emotional because that's the game for these 2 teams. And so to go up against a third consecutive, very difficult opponent might be a lot to ask from Ohio State, despite all their talent.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough to win that many games in a row. I mean, obviously we've got 3 undefeated teams in college football this season, but it's hard to do. It's not the normal. You have 3-4 teams with battling and undefeated and 1 losses. So teams get tripped up all the time, and obviously, especially when you have a tough stretch like Ohio State has, I think the Badgers are aware of that. They know that this team has got bigger aspirations with the playoff, and maybe they are a little worn down and overlooking this Big Ten championship game. But I assure you, once the Badgers and Buckeyes get going and that first punch gets thrown by one team or the other, that it'll probably refocus on them. So I'm expecting a tight battle like we've seen the last time these two squared off in the Big Ten championship, which is obviously a heartbreaker for a lot of Badger fans.
Christmas is coming, folks. Grab the link in the description section below. Use that link when you shop at Amazon. Same shopping experience. Don't have to buy the product. Same deal. Doesn't cost you an extra penny, but helps us build the channel. So if I would draw up two statistics for you and hand them to you and say, this is a winning formula just based on these two players, I would think Jack Cohn, 0 in the interception column again, would be a big plus, of course. And then not necessarily hitting for some ridiculous high percentage of completions, because that may not be possible against this defense, but similar to what he did against Minnesota, maybe hit on 60% of his throws. Maybe it's a 15 for 25 day. And if he's throwing the ball plus 40 times that they're behind. So maybe a 15 for 25 day for another 250 to 280 with big chunk plays downfield would be key. And what has obviously been the formula for Ohio State winning these big games against Wisconsin, and I believe it's 7 in a row dating to 2010, would be containing some of the best running backs in college football. Jonathan Taylor, Melvin Gordon come to mind, and others. And if we see Taylor, instead of running for 60 or 65 yards in one of these games, has been the norm for the Badgers' big back against the Buckeyes, it's more in the 130 or 140 range.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think, Jonathan Taylor, just to not only get on the scoreboard and keep this game close, but also to burn some of that clock, to keep that dynamic Ohio State offense off the field. It's going to be important for him to get his numbers. And I think he knows that this could be his final game in the Big Ten. And I know he was really hungry to get back to the Big Ten championship after his freshman season. And then, of course, I think he'd be a really good cap to his career to get to a Rose Bowl, which is something he hasn't experienced yet, because I'm going to firmly believe that he's going pro. His last game in Camp Randall, he was high-fiving fans running around the stadium. And then normally the axe is only for seniors to chop, but Jonathan Taylor got his chance as a junior. So you have to believe that he's going to take that jump to the next level. So he's going to want to go out and make an impact in his final couple games of his collegiate career. So he's going to have a big game. I think he knows that. He mentioned that in the Big Ten teleconference yesterday, that he knows he's going to have a big game. But at the same time, I think Jack Cohn is going to have to probably put up similar numbers to what he did last week, just simply to make the offense two-dimensional like we saw. I think Wisconsin can get a little conservative at times with Jonathan Taylor, but these last few weeks we've seen aggressive Paul Christ and going for it on fourth down and using other guys, and I think they're going to have to do that again this week.
And all Wisconsin needs to do is think back to the championship game from 2 years ago, in which Ohio State statistically dominated the game, controlled the game, would probably be more accurate if you look at total yardage, if you look at the stats. But the Buckeyes made mistakes in the second half, had a 2 or 3 score lead. Wisconsin had the ball with a 6-point deficit on the plus side of the field with a chance to win, despite being outgained considerably, made a few big plays in terms of turnovers, even though Ohio State, again, gashed them specifically in the first half for big offensive plays. And then you can mirror that to the Penn State game, in which Ohio State statistically dominated the game, controlled the game for like 55 minutes, both maybe the first 40 and then the back 10 or 15. But there was a flurry there in the third quarter where Penn State defenders got their hands on the football, stripped it away, got 3 possessions inside the Ohio State red zone, got back in the game. It's probably going to take that kind of flurry from Wisconsin and a turnover margin to pull out a win.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think they did a good job of getting pressure on Tanner Morgan last week and forcing some throws and some turnovers that he would like to have back. And they should have had a couple more interceptions. Just when you rewatch the tape, there was a lot of tip balls and stuff like that. It's going to have to take a similar effort to that, getting to the quarterback, getting to Justin Fields, and making some plays happen. Like you mentioned, the Andrew Van Ginkel pick 6 from last time. It's going to take a couple plays like that to get their offense off the field and put Wisconsin in favorable positions. But we've seen that defense do that this season, so I'm excited to see it. And I think it's going to shape out a lot like that battle a couple of years ago.
AJ Taylor, 2 catches against Minnesota, 23 catches, 2 touchdowns, and he's questionable.
Yep. He's got a banged up ankle. He's going to be questionable for Saturday. And then other than that, it looks pretty clean. Rashad Wildgoose, one of the corners, might be questionable as well, but I think they're pretty solid in that regard. And then the other one to note, he's been out for a while now. Bryson Williams, the nose tackle, had surgery this past weekend. He's out for the season now, but Keanu Benton, the freshman nose tackle, has been playing pretty much since that Iowa game. So no one was really surprised by that, but obviously a tough blow for the Badgers with their starting nose tackle out. But thankfully, Benton's been playing in and out all season, so he'll be ready to go on Saturday.
It's a Big Ten championship game that we're all familiar with, and most likely the 2 best teams in the conference, the way it should be. Ohio State taking on Wisconsin as the Badgers dismiss Minnesota in the final regular season game to reclaim the Western Division. Tyler Hunt from Bucky's Fifth Quarter. Please join him on SB Nation's platform for Wisconsin athletics. Tyler joins us on a regular basis. And Tyler, we always appreciate the breakdown, regardless of what happens on a Saturday night. Would love to have you back after we see that bowl bid come out.
Absolutely. Happy to do it. Thanks for having me, Mark.